Hi guys, I'm Iconic, and in this video I'm going to give you my thoughts on what it's like to play a PvP healer in the Elder Scrolls Online. Now I should point out that I'm only talking about PvP healing in this video. Don't get me wrong, I've got nothing at all against PvE healing, I've done plenty, but my main focus has always been on player versus player combat in the games I've played as a healer over the last 10 years or so. Now this is only the first video I've made about PvP healing in ESO, and I currently don't have a max rank character. I am leveling a Sniper Nightblade and at the same time a Templar healer, and it's got to be said, leveling is pretty slow going in Elder Scrolls Online. However, since the introduction of the non-veteran PvP instance Blackwater Blade, I've found there is plenty of player versus player fun to be had even on these lower level characters. So I'm going to talk about my experience of PvP healing at a non-veteran level for now. So let's get right to it. What is PvP healing like to play in the Elder Scrolls Online? Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The bad news is PvP healing in the Elder Scrolls Online is not like PvP healing in other MMOs. But the good news is PvP healing in the Elder Scrolls Online is not like PvP healing in other MMOs. It's different, yes. It's occasionally frustrating and hard to perfect, yes. But there are actually some really interesting features of the way healing works in ESO that I think give a new perspective for anyone who thinks they want to give PvP healing a go. With a couple of minor playstyle adjustments to what you might consider normal PvP healing from other MMOs, it's an overall experience that I think comes out feeling pretty good. Okay, if that's all you wanted to hear, then good luck. Get out there, go roll yourself a character, research the healing options for your class, there are plenty, and get to protecting your insane teammates from their own suicidal tendencies. However, for those of you who want a bit more detail, here's a bit more detail. Probably the biggest difference for me about the way healing works in ESO is the lack of a way to fix your target. Elder Scrolls Online uses a line-of-sight targeting approach with a crosshair, much like a traditional first-person shooter, unlike the original Elder Scrolls game. This means that your target is whatever is currently under your crosshair. There is no other way to select a target directly, or even to keep an individual focused for future swapping. What this means is the fundamental ability to select exactly who you are going to heal is not available to you. So, how the hell do you accurately control who you're healing? Well, basically you don't. The game decides that for you to a large degree. The vast majority of healing spells in ESO are AoE, Area of Effect, and for the occasional single target spells, they are smart targeting. In other words, the game automatically selects the friendly player with the lowest health within the range of your spell and applies the healing effect to that player. Obviously, this can cause some unwanted results. The most common one I've seen being when you see a bad situation developing and attempt to pre-heal yourself or someone else, only to find that your heal has magically, no pun intended, been applied to some other player off the edge of your screen who just happens to have lower health than you, and then the shit hits the fan, and then you die. However, despite this lack of direct control being a serious pain in the ass until you get used to it, there are actually several important benefits of a smart heal system in large-scale group PvP. Firstly, it allows for seamless grouping, where new players can just rock up, join the fight, and get healed immediately. Remember the frustration of out-of-group players in World of Warcraft open world PvP, where you couldn't effectively target them until they were invited into your raid group, so you'd be standing right next to this new guy watching him die because you just didn't have the time to use your mouse to click his avatar through the chaos of all the other player avatars and particle effects. Well, that's just not an issue in ESO. Every friendly player within spell range can be targeted by the smart heals. All you have to do is cast them in the right general direction. Secondly, and this is a little more controversial, it prevents the "I only heal me and my buddies" mentality that tends to happen with some small gang healers. They only want to do what's right by their friends, but often at the expense of the other players on the team. Well, with smart heals, everybody feels the love. So all in all, and even though it totally changes the way you need to think about your healing strategy, and your anticipation of those "oh shit" moments, Elder Scrolls Online does have a very fair and group-friendly healing mechanic, which fits well with the large-scale PvP environment. Finally, one of the biggest challenges for healers has always been how to manage your precious resources so that when you find the group is suddenly under pressure, you're able to respond and still put out the required amount of healing. Elder Scrolls Online actually offers several strategies for addressing this problem. Everything from stacking magicka stats and gear enchantments, Mundus stone buffs and armor traits to enhance them, food and potion buffs, the heavy attack with the restoration staff that gives back a healthy chunk of magicka if you can afford the time to cast it, and of course several different skill tree abilities that help with magicka pool, regen, and spell cost reduction. So here are the healing skills I'm running at the moment. The morph of Grand Healing on the restoration staff Healing Springs actually gives magicka back per player affected up to a maximum of 3. On top of this, you can spam cast one Healing Springs on top of another, and the heals will stack on the players within the area of effect. This means that even though one cast of this spell gives a pretty feeble amount of healing, spamming it 3 or 4 times on the same group soon adds up, and you get around 30% of the magicka back as long as there are 3 or more targets in the area. The morph of Cleansing Ritual in the Restoring Light tree, Purifying Ritual, does a fairly reasonable AoE healing over time, but more importantly, it allows players in the area to trigger a debuff removing effect, to get rid of all those nasty dots that are sapping their health and your magicka. And finally, for those oh shit moments, the morph of Rushed Ceremony in the Restoring Light tree, Honor the Dead, returns upwards of 15% of its magicka cost when used on players with less than 50% health, which is going to be the case on most of your emergency targets. Now there are other options that I have tried but are not in this build, like the very magicka efficient Lingering Ritual or the multi-target Blessing of Restoration. But Lingering Ritual has a cast time that makes it all too easy to be interrupted or simply heal too late, and Blessing of Restoration just ends up chewing through your magicka anyway when you need to spam it, despite its fairly low cost. I still want to try out the morph of Rune Focus, Channeled Focus, at the top of the Restoring Light tree, which buffs magicka regen, but I haven't quite got there yet. I'll post another video when I see how this performs. So anyway, this build is a little and often setup that is designed for good magicka efficiency and regen. It definitely does sacrifice pure healing output, which means that you're going to miss some of those more extreme last second saves. But there are several practical factors that you need to consider here. Generally speaking in Elder Scrolls Online, you have less specific control over your healing output, so you need to avoid wasteful healing. Most good players will have specced into a certain amount of self-healing, or at least damage mitigation, which means you will generally have more time to respond to them being put under pressure. And finally, good use of forward camps means that dead players can be back on the field in no time at all. All in all, personally it feels to me that being able to put out a constant level of support healing over as long a time as possible allows your surviving teammates to battle it out for long enough for the reinforcements to arrive and take off the pressure, so you can grab back your dwindling magicka pool and keep on healing. PvP healer gameplay in Elder Scrolls Online is more about supporting a large group of players, being aware of the wider battle, positioning yourself optimally, standing at the back and spamming AoE heals whilst managing your magicka, and watching the group's health bars, hoping that no one gets suddenly ganked and trying to catch them if they do. Now although this may sound okay, I admit in practice it doesn't quite have the same level of engagement or gameplay as healing an arena team in World of Warcraft, for example. However, all is not lost, far from it in fact. Because just as it's possible for all players to have some degree of self-healing, the most interesting thing for a healer in Elder Scrolls Online is it's entirely possible for you to be a fully specced healer and still have access to some pretty devastating damage output. Now anyone who's ever enjoyed griefing opponents with cyclone spam or fearing the enemy into despair as a druid or a priest will know how satisfying it can be when Mr. Nice Guy Healer also gets to be a genuine pain in the ass for the enemy players. Elder Scrolls Online takes this a step further with the ability to have 2 completely separate ability bars and 2 completely different weapons if you choose, so you can really let your schizophrenic multiple personality disorder take over when you switch from your healing bar to your DPS bar and take down enemies with stuns and burst damage. This also means that a hybrid healer damage dealer can be a real benefit to small gang roaming groups, where everyone ideally needs to contribute as much as possible to every fight. I personally find these smaller gang roams to be some of the most satisfying PvP healing I've played since arena matches in WoW. So to sum up, if you come to ESO PvP expecting to roll a nigh-on indestructible Angel of Protection, who can scoop their fragile target out of the very jaws of death and deposit them safe and sound with a pat on the head, then I'm afraid you might be disappointed. However, if you want variety and many more flexible roles as a large group healer, assault and defense support, a run and gun style small gang roaming field medic, and you're itching to take revenge on players who think you must be a soft target by turning around and kicking their ass with your ult bar, then I definitely recommend you roll yourself a PvP healer I'd come help out in Cyrodiil.